In 2023, a year into Russia's full-scale invasion, Chinese delegations made multiple trips to Russia on a highly secretive mission. According to leaked Russian defense documents, China was seeking to acquire certain military technology from Moscow. This is despite Beijing's massive investment in its own defense industry and push for self-sufficiency. Among other weapons and items, China was looking for parachutes, not the kind used by extreme sports enthusiasts, but heavy-duty parachute systems capable of airdropping armored vehicles. This is not an AI-generated video. It's a real military capability, necessary for one of the most difficult operations in warfare – seizing territory across the sea, like the stretch of water that is separating China from Taiwan. The leaked documents detail contracts under which Russia would supply China not only parachute systems, but also armored vehicles, ammunition, and potentially even aircraft. At least one of these contracts has a deadline of 2027, the year that some defense analysts believe Beijing has set as a benchmark for readiness to move against Taiwan. So, is China actually gearing up to invade Taiwan, a longtime ally of the US? And what role could Russian weapons play in it? China and Russia started their military cooperation long before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Under a 2019 contract known as SWORD, Russia was to develop software and hardware to automate command of China's airborne troops by integrating battlefield data from multiple sources. Though it was planned to be completed by the end of 2022, Russia repeatedly delayed, and its status as of late 2025 is unknown. The leaked documents suggest that China was dissatisfied, yet in 2022 it still moved to deepen cooperation with the Russian military. Over the next 2 years, Chinese officers and defense manufacturers have repeatedly visited Russia to inspect various weaponry and negotiate deals. Neither side has publicly confirmed these visits, but we managed to verify the leaked documents through third-party sources, including customs, flight, and court records. We identified 40 Chinese military and defense contractor personnel who visited Russia to negotiate deals. So, what exactly did China buy? According to one contract, presumably signed in October 2024, China ordered a set of Russian armored vehicles and weapons for their airborne troops. It includes combat vehicles, ammunition, and parachute systems for airdropping vehicles and paratroopers. Another contract, likely signed in November 2023, indicates China's purchase of the Russian Il-78 aircraft. In addition to refueling military planes both in the air and on the ground, they can potentially be converted for paratrooping equipment. So why is China stocking up on weapons for its airborne forces? Analysts believe that China currently favors a naval blockade scenario for conquering Taiwan. One of the other options they have is a direct military invasion, which would require landings of a sufficient amount of troops on the island. There are several options for doing so, but each comes with its own risks. Amphibious landings by sea seems to be the most obvious option, but they would actually be highly risky due to the limited number of suitable beaches and their dispersion. Another option is flying troops in by aircraft to airfields. But Russia's attempt to capture Kyiv in 2022 showed that this tactic can't be relied on exclusively, since the defenders can quickly make airfields unusable and shoot down planes and helicopters. The third option, you guessed it, is parachuting both equipment and soldiers. The advantage of this tactic is that the landings can occur pretty much anywhere on open and firm ground, like golf courses. But it is extremely vulnerable to air attacks and can only deliver lighter vehicles. China likely does not want to bet on a single approach and aims to diversify its capabilities, keeping all options at its disposal.
As we can see from all of this Chinese sources, the intense Chinese debate among strategists and think tankers, that they haven't figured out a central strategy to a Taiwan approach. People debate whether we should do a blockade, whether we should do a airborne invasion, whether we should do decapitation strike.
Before we go further into the story, to determine whether an attack is possible in 2027, I want to remind you that the Kyiv Independent is a member-funded media outlet. It's with our community support that we can do investigations like this. Now back to the story.
Now China's defense industry is so robust, and there is such an emphasis from the top down on self-sufficiency, right? This has been, the emphasis of Xi Jinping for multiple years now.
Indeed, in recent years, the Chinese defense industry has seen tremendous investment in domestic production. China produced missiles, Chinese Navy with increasingly sophisticated ships, Chinese armored fighting vehicles.
The goal has always been to become a regional hegemon. In every single sector, you see a tremendous kind of emphasis on self-sufficiency, on independence.
Then why does China need Russian equipment?
От саме компонента повітряно-десантних військ у китайців може бути, на їхню думку, ще недостатньо розвинута, бо вони роблять зараз акцент на морські складові, тобто все, що має доповзти, давайте назвемо так умовно, морем.
But China wasn't only after equipment. Moscow has something else that Beijing doesn't. During closed-doors negotiations, China specifically requested that Russia shares its combat experience with its technologies.
In that sense, definitely. Russia can provide kind of expertise from their combat history that China could stand to gain a lot from. Russia's airborne troops have had recent experience in Ukraine, of course, and have had experience over decades, whereas China's PLA has much more limited experience with their airborne corps.
You're probably wondering about that major failure of Russia's airborne troops to land at an airfield near Kyiv, and why China would want to learn from that. The thing is, experience of failure is still more experience than China has. And over the course of this war, Russia has shown time and again that it can learn from its mistakes, even though it never had another chance to prove itself in traditional airborne operations. So, all in all, China agreed to pay millions of dollars for Russia to share its experience and provide its equipment. And at least one of the contracts has a 2027 deadline, aligning with what is speculated to be a defining year for China's invasion of Taiwan. Still, the decision to invade will not necessarily take place in 2027, analysts believe.
What Xi Jinping said was that the PLA should be ready to take Taiwan by 2027. It's not necessarily a deadline for invasion. I think China's main deadline for a Taiwan unification, or reunification as they call it, is 2049. So you see in every kind of PLA article, every PLA daily article, any Chinese source, the national rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, or the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, as they say, is something that will occur in 2049. And that formulation always exists side by side with national reunification.
Whether China will invade Taiwan in the next few years, and whether Russian technology will play a role, there is another side to the story, one that is already benefiting from these contracts. For Russia, China's payments provide essential funding for state-owned arms manufacturers, which have been under international sanctions since 2022 and have seen a decline in export deals. While the value of the aircraft deal is not mentioned in the documents available to us, the value of the contract on vehicles and munitions is approximately $600 million. China is supposed to make payments gradually over the next several years, and they are expected to be made in US dollars, giving Russia hard currency despite sanctions. But these military contracts should not be overlooked as merely transactional cooperation.
Російсько-китайський воєнний альянс аж занадто міцний, причому він аж занадто міцний, аніж під час періоду цього медового місяця між Мао Цзедуном і Сталіним, там, де якби що радянська, що китайська пропаганда говорила про 1000 років дружби. Виходить, що зараз як російсько-китайський альянс ніколи міцний, але чомусь на це відповідної реакції немає.
Normally, such a development would be expected to draw a reaction from the US, whose global influence is the first to be affected by a strengthening alliance between Russia and China.
The second Trump administration that started earlier this year has been incredibly reticent to put any sanctions on the Russian Federation whatsoever. They've also, frankly, been fairly accommodationist towards Beijing in a number of areas. Trump is hoping for some type of trade deal and has reportedly even criticized behind closed doors the Japanese Prime Minister for making statements that would be in support of Taiwan, which is not a good sign, as we would like to see the United States be a moral voice for supporting democracy and rule of law around the world, and not taking actions to push back on the Russian Federation or the People's Republic of China is doing none of those things. And I will say to those that support the Trump administration, this is also not an America First policy. These are all America Last policies. These are policies that will ultimately strengthen our geopolitical adversaries in Moscow and Beijing and do nothing to support U.S. national security.
By failing to respond to the strengthening Russia-China alliance, the US is allowing two aggressive campaigns to accelerate. And while one has been in full swing for years, it seems it's only a matter of time when the other one erupts. If you think these findings are important, please like, share and comment on this video. And if you want to help us do more investigations like this, consider becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent. Our work is funded by our readers.